Good morning. It's Wednesday morning, the 13th of June, and this is the summary and overview of what I saw yesterday, which was the 12th of June at the SLA conference. I attended 3 sessions yesterday, both very informative, in addition to the annual business meeting of the SLA, as well as I attended the luncheon for the Military Libraries Division. So the first session I went to was entitled Seven Competencies of Highly Effective Knowledge Managers. And this was led by a gentleman by the name of Stan Garfield. Stan Garfield has written a book about communities of practice. He has a new one out that he was signing at the Lucidia booth. I happen to have I was able to get a copy of it. And his presentation boils down to basically 7 things. He went through a lot of lists of 7 things in his presentation. But the key list was used the acronym SAFARIS, SAFARIS, which stands for Share Tips, Ask Questions and Collaborate, Find Resources, Answer Questions, Recognize Colleagues' collaborations and achievements, Inform Others of Activities and Plans, and Suggest Ideas and Solicit Input, which is really the sort of the building blocks, the fundamentals of good knowledge management. But he went further along in his discussion to talk about competencies and skills. And it just, of all the things that he said, it always bears in mind that good communication skills, project management skills, and collaboration are going to sort of trump everything else in terms of being able to put together a effective knowledge management capability. He also said that oftentimes companies, organizations, they talk about their KM system. So they talk about, oh, we're rolling out SharePoint. So what that does, that type of language does, it sort of skews the conversation that KM, knowledge management, is simply a tools or a technology solution, when really it encompasses a lot more than that. As we used to say at Accenture, it includes tools, training or schools, and rules, process. So he takes a more broader approach, which includes the behavioralist aspects of KM, the attributes, the behaviors that one needs to have an effective KM capability. I would recommend that you go to his, search his name, you'll find his website. He's the leader of the SIKM Leaders Community, which is a collaborative space where people can ask questions, answer questions about these the knowledge, building and sustaining a knowledge management capability. I just wanted to put a few more comments that he made, is that KM must always be linked to the business metrics. There always must be a pointing back to what is the business rationale for a knowledge management capability. How does knowledge management really support fundamentally the business architecture? Let's see, what else did he say? He talked about really monitoring media, listening to podcasts, being able to take your own professional development in the KM world in hand. So you develop your own list of sources, such as podcasts, publications that you look at and read. In his presentation, he gave us a very good starting point for things that you can be looking at on a regular basis. Let's see, what else? Also, the last thing he pointed out is sometimes people think of KM as sort of one monolithic thing, when it really encompasses a lot of disciplines. So, and he showed a slide with some 30 or 40 different disciplines. He says that there's no way that a person can be conversant, expert in all of those. Pick 2 or 3 that appeal to you or appeal to your skill set, or just are new things that you want to try, and focus on those. And that you can use in helping grow a knowledge management capability. The second session that I went to was entitled Don't Get Faked Out by News, Developing Informed Citizens, and this was moderated by Leslie Farmer of Cal State Long Beach. And what she was talking about was the proliferation of, to use the deprecated term, false news or fake news. And what was very interesting in her presentation is that the purveyors of fake news, or people who want to sort of get that message across, they use oftentimes the same sort of attributes and the same sort of appeals that advertisers use. And the biggest one that they seem to be using is an appeal to fear. And what she was exhorting us as information professionals to do is really test everything, test all sources, understand your own biases. We all have internal biases, whether it's, as she said, whether you're pro sushi or anti sushi, that's a bias. But acknowledge them and then use those biases and overcome them in terms of filtering news for patrons. This was really a lot of it was meant more toward academic librarians who are helping prepare students to go out into the real world. Let's see. She did show some very good pathfinders from Cal State Long Beach Library on how to discriminate between false news and real news. And the key thought is the more you know about news, how it's gathered, the better off you are. So really look back to where are these news articles coming from? Who's writing them? What's their biases and that sort of thing. So that will really help create an informed citizenry. The last, I forgot to mention, we went to this. There was a second keynote yesterday with Dr. Sahid Chowdhury from Johns Hopkins, and he's working on a project, or he has worked on a project called the Data Conservatory, and he started the talk with a somewhat provocative statement that data is just is really another type of collection that needs to be curated. And he talked about data preservation, and he gave this example. Let's say he creates a spreadsheet with data in it, rows and columns, and they put it off into some sort of document management system, and it's there. Is it really preserved? Because if you come back 4 or 5, 6 months, a year later, and you don't know what the column headings mean, has that data been really preserved? And he talked about preservation of data without having to go back to the original source or where you got it from, being able to have it all sort of encapsulated there for you. And what was interesting was he came back to this later on in the talk, which was really, I wrote a lot of notes, but really what he told some stories about data, and one of them was a story that involved a woman who had worked at Johns Hopkins in the food service for many, many, many years, and talked about her interactions with students. And he asked the question, some of these students she helped along the way as they were in college or in graduate school on a sort of a personal human level. And he said, by and large, some of these people owe whatever percentage of their success to the work of this woman who worked in the cafeteria, who helped them over a rough patch. And he talked about linked data. And he talked about how data should be linked so that you can really capture the voices. He constantly came back to the idea of capturing the voices of individuals. And he talked about how oftentimes those who are doing the capturing, again, there's a bias issue here. And he's talked about how there's bias in data collection and data mapping. And he said, if we took this data map of one of these scholars who this woman helped, and she was just one node in that map, have we really captured the voice? The fact that this person who worked in the cafeteria at Johns Hopkins for 47 some odd years, and she helped these students, she's just sort of a node in a network of data. But have we really captured the voice? And that gave me pause to think about, the things that, we capture, the voices that we're not hearing. And then he comes back to this idea of archiving and storing data without having to go back to the original source. And, is that such a really good thing? It was a really powerful and gave me a lot of pause to think. And again, I've got I've got some other notes here that I really need to go through and think about and discern about in my own work with data and information. The last thing I went to was the future of CI. What does tomorrow hold? And that was with Craig Fleischer, who I saw the day before, Cynthia Caricia, and Claudia Clayton. And what was interesting in this session was there were a lot of challenges that were put forth. For example, the challenges regarding predatory journals that people try to get published in, either because they can't get published anywhere else or they're forced to. How do we as information professionals, what are our opportunities to really help people discern and go through that information, look at those journals and see what's of value. One of the ideas, or one of the points that I brought up was that there's been a lot of consolidation in the legal publishing world, and what impact is that going to be on quality, the commoditization of search in the legal communities or the legal products, and what impact does that have on the ability of people to really do good search, and also the ability to draw analogies. I always say that sometimes we're getting people who really all they want to do is put the round peg in the round hole, the square peg in the square hole, but they can't draw the analogies that really are going to help them draw helpful legal conclusions. At this point, we are at the 11-minute mark of this video, so I'm going to stop it right here. Thank you for watching. Please contact me with more questions. Bye-bye.